Hi everybody, today is a new day, so here comes another rule for exponents. Today we're going to talk about the zero power rule, and it might be a little bit different than what you're thinking it's going to be. We're going to talk about any number, any base raised to the zero power, and we're going to try to figure out what those answers will be. So let's get started. Oh yeah. Any number to the zero power is going to be equal to 1. And we are going to prove that in the next 2 slides. Okay. All right. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at these tables. We are going to complete the following tables, and we are going to see if there is some kind of pattern that will show us what any base to the zero power is actually equal to. So let's start over here with our lovely 2 to the 4th power and try to figure out what the value is. Well, we know the 4 tells us how many times we're going to multiply the 2 times itself. So that will really be written out as 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So the value of 2 to the 4th is 16. Now let's go ahead and solve or find the value of 2 to the 3rd power. 2 to the 3rd, because of the 3, it tells us how many times to multiply the 2 by itself. So 2 times 2 times 2. And 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So we know 2 to the 3rd power is equal to the value of 8. Let's go ahead and find the value of 2 to the 2nd power. Well, we know the 2 tells us how many times to multiply the 2 times itself. So in this situation, it's 2 times 2. And we know that value is going to be 4. Beautiful. Now we're going to continue this pattern. So since we are at 2 to the 2nd here, now we're going to do 2 to the 1st. Beautiful. And we know that that 1 just tells us the value of 2 to the 1st, because this 1 tells us how many times we're going to multiply 2 by itself. And in this situation, it's only 1 time. So there it is. That's my answer. Now I'm going to keep following the same pattern. So now this will be 2 to the 0. Okay. How do I figure out the value of 2 to the 0 power? Well, let's see if we can find a pattern in our value column. So if we go from 16 to 8, what can I do to 16 to get it down to 8? Well, notice I can divide by 2. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Let's keep going and seeing if this pattern works. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So far, so good. What's 4 divided by 2? Hopefully it's 2. Oh my gosh, it is. Yay, our pattern is still working. Let's go ahead and continue the pattern. Uh-oh. It may not be what you think. What is 2 divided by 2? Well, guess what? It's 1. So if we're following the pattern of a table, we can see that if we continue the pattern of dividing by 2 over and over and over again, then we can get down to the value of 2 to the 0 power equaling 1. Let's see if that same rule will work when I'm doing a base of 3, because maybe that only works when it's 2 to the 0 power. So let's look up here. First thing we're going to do is figure out what is 3 to the 4th power. Well, remember, 3 to the 4th power is 3 times 3, which is 9, times 3, which is 27, times 3. Oh, gee, what's 27 times 3? I think it's 81, but I'm not sure. So let's go ahead and do it over here. 27 times 3. Oh, I'm so right. I know I'm right. I think I'm right. Okay, here we go. 7 times 3 is 21. Oh, and 3 times 2 is 6 plus 2 is 8. Oh, what? Got that right. I'm so excited. Sometimes I actually know math, and that works out pretty good for me. Okay, so now let's find the value of 3 to the 3rd power. The 3 tells us how many times to multiply the 3 times itself. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. So that value is 27. 3 to the 2nd power just means 3 times 3, which is 9. We're going to continue this pattern. We have 3 to the 1st power, which we know is 3, because there's only one 3. And then 3 to the 0 power. We don't know. We know 2 to the 0 power was 1, but we're not really sure what 3 to the 0 power is. Now, What could I do with 81 to get it to 27? Well, it has something to do with this lovely base. Just like over here, we divided by, it matched my lovely base of 2. So guess what we're dividing with here? Our base of what? 3. So let's divide this by 3. And 81 divided by 3 is 27. That works. What's 27 divided by 3? Oh, it's 9. Oh my gosh, so far my pattern's working. What's 9 divided by 3? 9 divided by 3 is 3. So let's continue this pattern. 3 divided by 3. And oh my gosh, we get 1. So once again, it's showing that 3 to the 0 power is also equal to 1. So we had 2 to the 0 power is equal to 1. We had 3 to the 0 power is equal to 1. So what does that really mean? Let's take a look at the next page and figure out if any base raised to the 0 power is actually 1. Let me erase this page. There we go. And let's move on to the next one. Awesome. All right. Now we're going to see if we can prove it a different way. Let's take a look. We have y to the 4th divided by y to the 4th. You've already learned your rules of exponents when you're dividing exponents with the same base. So right now, the first thing I do is I look at my base. My base is a y. Oops, sorry, I can't get my pen to work for some reason. And my base over here is a y. So when we divide exponents that have the same base, we subtract our exponents, remember, and we keep the base. Well, y to the 4th divided by y to the 4th, if I subtract my exponents and keep my base, I get y to the 0 power. But what do you think that's going to mean as if I'm going to evaluate that? We talked about 2 to the 0 power being 1. We talked about 3 to the 0 power being 1. I wonder if y to the 0 power is also 1. Well, let's write it out in expanded form to see if we can get that same value of 1. Y to the 4th. If I'm going to write that out in expanded form, remember the 4 tells me how many times I'm going to multiply the y by itself, which is 4 times. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4 times. This y to the 4th tells me I'm going to write that one out 4 times, or multiply the y times itself 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember, this fraction bar just means division, so don't forget that. So, what do you know about division when we divide something by itself? Think about it. If I have 1,000,000 and I divide it by 1,000,000, what is it? It's 1. If I have 5 divided by 5, it's 1. If I have 20 divided by 20, it's 1. If I have 1,240,000 divided by 1,240,000, it's 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So if y is being divided by y, that's just a fancy form of 1. Here's another one. Y divided by y, fancy form of 1. Y divided by y, fancy form of 1. Y divided by y, fancy form of 1. So really what this is just 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, or my value of, oh boy, 1. So wait, we just proved that this y to the 0 power is really equal to 1 if I write it out in expanded form. And doesn't that make sense? We just discussed the fact that anything divided by itself is 1. So if I have y to the 4th, which is what my original problem was, and I'm dividing it by itself, y to the 4th, guess what that value also is? It's 1. So what this proves to us is that any number, and don't get nervous that there's an x down here. All that x means is any, oh gee, that's terrible, number raised to the 0 power is 1. Any number. Okay, we're going to do some practice with our stations today to prove this even further. So good luck with that, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.